I'm joined here by Senator Carl Bjerke of District 5. That is Coeur d'Alene, just the city, I believe, isn't it?
Well, actually, District 5 starts at the Benoit-Kootenai border
Oh,
down the south, goes all the way up into Post Falls to about Prairie. In a basic sense, it's the everything west of the lake, all the way to the border, except there's a little bit of District 3 that kind of comes around and does a little button hook about state line. That's probably more than you needed to know, though.
I see. I just brought it up on the other screen. Should have done that before we started. But yeah, I need to brush up on my geography of North Idaho. Hopefully, at the convention this year, I'll have a chance to get to know it a little better.
Oh, yes, it'll be nice to have everybody up here.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we can start by just talking about yourself. How did you get in the position where you're in the state Senate, and what's the journey of your life that brought you there?
Well, it's interesting. I look back at what I've done through my life, a lot of leadership positions and politics to a certain extent, and I forgot a lot about my desire to be in politics as I went through about a 32-year career in public safety, But even in that position, being in management, being on the management team for the city, it was, for the most part, a political position. But I think back at even a high school student, being the representative at the Boys State, being on student council, being the president of the Key Club, so I guess politics has kind of slightly been in my vein for a lot longer than I thought. But when I decided that my wife and I were going to retire, and we were looking for a place to settle, North Idaho was calling us in the sense that we'd already had a son that moved to Idaho to be a firefighter in Meridian, and my what was left, or small portion of what was left of my family, moved up to Idaho prior, and we came up to visit, and we said, "Hey, this is a great place, and we'll be next to family." Never thought I'd be involved in politics. I really did just set out to retire. My brother-in-law and I would, frequent you know, the local gyms and just, being on the lake, doing all the things that retired people do until COVID hit. And something sparked me to come out of retirement and get back into public service. I was really dismayed, just kind of taken back by how quickly things changed almost overnight, and how our freedoms were being grasped from us. It was just, it was kind of an eye-opening experience.
I think a lot of people went through that same experience. My family, we moved out here in 2018 from Washington. So it was right before COVID. And I'm glad we did. We moved when we did. Otherwise, as bad as it was here, it was worse in those blue states. I'm not sure what I would have done. But yeah, the reaction here still leaves a lot to be desired. And I think it woke a lot of people up and got them to realize that the decisions that are made locally, in the state legislature, city councils, counties, that has a lot more of impact on your life than decisions made in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and that's kind of what got me involved, is knowing that local politics is where we can make an impact. It's interesting because we went through a process to kind of be vetted by our local central committee up
Mhm.
here. My wife is on the school board, CDA 271. So, and I was actually going to be running for Kootenai County Board of Fire Commissioners. That's where I thought I'd be best suited. And as things turned out, it was probably a proper thing for me to back out of the race. We would have split the vote, and the gentleman that ended up getting it would have been, I think, more suited to it. He had already done it for about 10 years prior. Um, and we had a long talk. And so I kind of bowed out of that race and figured I'll just help my wife. I'll be her treasurer. I'll do everything to support her on her school board bid. And she won. And next thing I know, someone's tapping him on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, do you think about running for something other than fire commissioner?" And the rest is history. I can bore you with a long story. It's got some interesting twists and turns. I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, But here I am, happy to be doing the bidding for my constituents down in Boise, doing my best to represent up here. And
So
I'll serve in this capacity as long as they see fit to keep sending me back.
Well, you defeated an incumbent in 2022, and pretty solidly too, it looks like. So obviously people wanted something different. Now that you're in and you've filled out your first term, what are you hearing from people? Or you think people have been pretty satisfied, or do you need to really get out there and convince folks?
Generally speaking, and I'm pretty good judge of things that have to do with me. I'm probably the hardest on myself than anybody. I see people being satisfied. I quickly got out of the session and came right up here and bounced into, interviews and debates and town halls and walking my district. So I haven't had quite even a day or two respite. So I've been injected right back into the community, and for the most part, uh, I'm close with a lot of people up here. Uh, they're good also to kind of keep me thinking about what I'm really doing and what I said I was setting out to do. So it's a good group of people to kind of keep you thinking the right way, so to speak. But it's a long way to say that I feel fairly comfortable that the folks that sent me down the first time are going to be welcoming me back this time as well.
I was at a candidate forum recently, and they asked everyone on stage, how do you decide how you're going to vote on things? And basically, everybody said the three C's. Does it follow the Constitution? Is it what my constituents want? And how does it sit on my conscience? But I imagine that even Democrats will say that that's the heuristic that you use. So one thing I've been wondering is how you stay grounded. When you're looking for information on a subject, on a bill, you've got a lot of voices down there in Boise, and the lobbyists and the interests, and they're subject matter experts in their own areas. Uh,
Right.
but how do you stay grounded and connected to your own people, especially when you're so far away?
Actually, it's interesting. I handled it different the first session the first half of the session that I ended up doing the second half of the session. There's quite a steep learning curve. You can't know everything about everything, as much as we'd like to. You do your best. I have a similar approach to how I vote. I literally write when our chaplain is praying. I also pray for wisdom and knowledge that the votes I make will best represent my constituents and God's will for that matter.
Mhm.
Of course, I go down the line of the Constitution, Idaho Constitution, the Republican platform, Idaho Republican platform, my constituents. And I stop there. It's not that lobbyists and special interest groups don't weigh in. I just know that you can't please everybody, right? And I really need to please the folks that I'm representing. So um, that's kind of how I look at it. This year, I actually went a little bit further. I'm on JFAC and health and welfare. So those can be kind of heavy lifts. I'm the vice chair on JFAC. So that puts me in an interesting position as well, especially as a first-time legislator. We get like 300, I don't know, email a day. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning and hoping to get in bed at 10. And literally the only time I have to really check email is a short break, in the day if I don't have a meeting and when I get home at night. So I actually paid somebody this year to actually go through my email and do the totaling of constituents. One, identifying, are these people truly from District 5? Not that I don't represent everybody in the state of Idaho, but I would give, obviously, if I'm representing a group of people, I want to differentiate between that. And just give me the pros and the cons, the who's for and who's not, what the totals are. That was really helpful for me to get down to that fine of a line on how I was going to vote on something. And it very well could have been, I might have been texting her before a vote and saying, hey, what's the total on this? And I think a lot of people think that we go into those sessions in those debates with our minds made up, and that's not necessarily the case. I tell lobbyists the same thing. I will know how I'm voting the second I vote, and I truly do it that way. There are times that are slam dunks, and I've told lobbyists or anybody else asking me, this is the way I'm voting on this. Not saying that someone could not convince me otherwise through a great debate, but there are some things that you just know you're going to vote a certain way, especially if they came through your committee. Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of your committee, I've gotten to know my own representative here in District 14, Representative Josh Tanner. He's also on JFAC, and he sounds like he has a similar schedule. I don't know when he sleeps. It seems like JFAC is a scary place for a lot of people. It's much more fun to be on state affairs or judiciary and rules. But that's really where a lot of the work is done in deciding where our tax dollars go and really what the state is promoting. So, you know, well, first, I guess, how did you end up as vice chair just in your first term? And second, what's been your experience, especially with the new budgeting process this year?
People have asked me the vice chair question a few times, and I guess I'd have to ask Senator Grow at some point. Was it me talking to you at our caucus dinner when you first met me? I know there's a lot of things when they're trying to figure out the schedule and who can go where. I'd like to think that they thought I'd do a good job of it. Truthfully, it's not as glamorous as a lot of other things you could be doing. It is a lot of work. I'm not one to say that, hey, I'm going to avoid the difficult work, but there's some places I probably have a better time if you can think about enjoying what you're doing when you're legislating. But I also will seek to do it again because there's so much of a learning curve. You don't do justice to the system, to the people of Idaho for you to flip in and flip out of something that took that much time to kind of figure out, how the budget is even just put together to begin with. But kind of happy. I talked to Chairman Grow a lot over the interim leading up to this session or this half of the session over the potential changes that they were looking at making. And I was pretty much every time I talked to him, I said, if I had my way based on my quick view of how things happen in the first half of the session, and someone said, could you critique or can you come up with, a better way to do this? I liked everything he mentioned to me. I liked the accountability, the more transparency. The maintenance budget I thought was a great thing. It's an incremental step to, I think, being able to, really get down to the nitty gritty of these budgets, and again, it's hard for me to talk out of school in the sense that I am a new legislator. I literally did just now get my feet wet. I learned a lot, but I don't have a huge amount of historical perspective to draw my conclusions from. All I know is that I feel that the process that we moved to this time is setting the groundwork for hopefully some future changes that I think will be better for the state of Idaho.
Yeah. Well, I know, there's a lot of folks who want to see, drastic changes, especially to the budget. It's gone up a lot just in the last few years. A lot of it due to federal money coming in due to COVID and such. And I think last I heard, the rate of increase this year was something like only 1.6%, or, it's like, okay, it's a runaway train and you've gotten a hold of it. Now we need to figure out what to do with it. That's
Yeah, and it's a tough one because everybody's got a little bit more of a sense of what's really driving it and what more nationally, but even globally for that matter, right? And sometimes, you don't want to be in the position where you think you're just kind of maybe rearranging chairs on the Titanic, right? We're going through the motions, but in reality, some of the bigger things we need to think about are happening at the national level, right? Or even the global level. Central banks, and the digital currency that, they're pushing. The fact that we're almost 35 trillion in debt as a nation, and we just have a huge packet that we've signed to, has got to get to the Senate to send all this money overseas. It's like, if someone says, well, the checkbook must have something in it, but in reality, no, we're just creating more and more debt. So for me, when I think about my role in Idaho, is somehow providing a buffer, in hopes that we are not subject to what I see as a looming major economic disaster here in our nation. And I don't like talking about that kind of stuff because if the least I can do in my position is provide hope for somebody, people that send me down to Boise, if all they really want to get out of it is to feel good that there's somebody who is actually fighting for them, then it's hard to talk about some of these things that are kind of scary, but I think Idaho's is positioned itself well to be able to weather some storms. I think as we go forward and we really get into those budgets and we start tapering away from what we actually take from the federal government. At one point, I think it was last year, 40%. And, it beat what we actually spent, 38% from the general fund. It's a little bit more. We actually spent more in the general fund this time. I think it's 37.9 to 37.6, really close. But our general fund dollars were spent more than we got from the federal government. A lot to do with we're not getting as much COVID money. We're not getting as much ARPA stuff. So that's a natural occurrence. Our dedicated funds went up, which is interesting, from about 22% to 24%. So we've yet to really delve into kind of all these factors based on the fact that we had huge infusions of money coming from a debted federal government, So hopefully we can get back to the point where we can feel a little bit more self-sustaining, incrementally. And that's why none of the things I think we can do with the budget are overnight solutions.
Yeah.
Everybody always says, "Hey, you gotta vote no on this budget." I go, so what you're saying is, all these constituents of mine that are on Medicaid, I'm just gonna pull the carpet out from under them tomorrow, right? We actually have to be thoughtful. We have to legislate, and make prudent decisions. I think that's why people send us down there. And of course, I have a certain increased political liability as a vice chair because you're in leadership on JFAC, and in any leadership I've ever been in, you don't lead a group of people and at the last second leave them, just as the battle starts, right? I vote for all the most conservative budgets in JFAC, but whatever gets voted out with a do pass and comes on the floor, although I pick and choose, there's some real some doozies for different reasons that I have to vote against. It's tough as a vice chair to vote against your own budgets, if that makes sense. But
That's what I've heard from Senator Grow as well, that, he comes to our District 14 meetings and says, all right, I know you're happy with me now, but I'm going to have to start voting for some of these because as the chairman, I have to lead. So I get it.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. And it's one of those ones where if the cup could pass me by, I'd let it, I think. Who knows? I mean, with the changes they made with this maintenance budget, we may be thrown out on our ears anyway. I mean, it wasn't popular from a lot of people's perspective to have such a monumental change, providing, some more transparency and accountability and the ability for people to really get down into to the finer details of those line items, So, Chairman Grow got beat up a little bit. The sad part of that is he gets beat up by his own people. Nobody knows, but the people are actually down there, that the struggles are very real, and the decisions you make and the criticisms you get for taking a step to be conservative and to really fight for your constituents, then you're perceived from those same constituents to not be appreciated. It's a really tough battle. Yeah, like I said, if the cup would pass me by, I think I might just say, okay, let someone else do it. That's not my nature. My nature is to find something that's difficult and to stick with it. Albeit my wife would rather me not, but I'll fight to stay on JFAC, and I'll fight to make those difficult decisions. And I hope my constituents understand when, there's certain things that we just have to do.
Well, I noticed that even, it took a monumental effort to get that change through and stand up to all the attempts to undermine it. But even then, it seems like the number of fiscal conservatives on JFAC is, still a pretty significant minority. There was only a few of you who were voting for the alternative motions for the smaller budgets.
Yeah, and that is the case, unless we have like a wholesale change in and how that balance is, it's going to be very difficult. I really enjoy some of the small victories, pointing out things like the DEI and the college budgets and things like that, and just drawing attention to things. And I don't want to, and I don't want to crumb on anybody that's been on JFAC for a long time, but it was part of the system, right? The system was established to have 90 to 95% of the budget process completely finished, before JFAC even gets to look at it. And there was an expectation legislatively, and I think from, the folks that are, 24/7 down there at the State House and the governor's office, that, hey, we did a good job in this budget and we just want you guys to kind of look at it and rubber stamp it. Um, eh, so I don't quite blame the fact that we're having to kind of slowly transition out of that, because that's it. That's the system. And we have 110 agency budgets that we have to go through in 3 months. I used to be part of someone who presented budgets. So I know that I know everything about my budget, right? And, the people that come and present to us, they know everything about their budget. But when you look at it, it's interesting because I know this from my experience. What are the line items numbered at? Oh, here's their first one. They got their first or second. Oh, and line item 32. And that's because the governor's already went through that with his staff and they've decided what was okay and what wasn't okay. So there's so much work that was done with LSO and everybody before we get there, So it makes it kind of difficult. There's not a whole lot left for us to kind of bite into, so to speak.
You mentioned paying somebody to go through your emails and tally who's for and who's against. And that's great that you're able to do that because y'all are part-time. You're there 3 months. Meanwhile, the governor's office and the other executive agencies, they're year round. They have staffs. Legislative Services has, they're there all the time. Yeah, and it seems like the representatives of the people come in at a severe disadvantage.
Yeah, so we do, and I don't often like mentioning that because people will go, "Hey, well, how's this guy afford to pay somebody to do this?" So it's a good thing and a bad thing. But the bottom line is, it's important enough for me,
Mhm.
uh, if I have the ability to do it, to ensure that I'm getting the word of my constituents to me, and it's worth it to me. It was something that I did the year before, but it was in a different capacity. Hadn't gotten to the point where those studies were being done, and this time I moved the ball a little bit further, and I was getting real-time information about how my constituents felt about it. But that's the bottom line. I think that's the biggest rub that I think most people have with I don't know, legislators here in Idaho, because it's different everywhere you go. They go, "Hey, I'll get an email. Can you have your staff reach out to me? Or can you do this?" And it's like, I got staff, and there's three of us. It's Carl, John, and Bjerke. And it just happens to be we're all the same person. And it is what it is. It's tough because you really want to be available, but you miss things and you don't have staff and you don't get paid a whole lot. And it's a part-time citizen legislature that in reality it's pretty much full-time. But to a certain extent, I guess it's dependent on how much the person is willing to put into it.
The way I see it, having observed y'all for a couple of years now, it really is a full-time job
Yeah,
because you're there working, and it's not 9 to 5 when session's in session. Like you said, get up
right.
at 4 and maybe get to bed by 10. And so you're working a ton then, and then you're obviously campaigning, which isn't necessarily part of the paid job, but it's part of the job, and just getting out and meeting people, interfacing with people, talking with stakeholders and lobbyists, and preparing. I'm sure you're already looking forward to preparing bills for the next session.
Yeah.
It's I don't really come down on either side, but I think paying legislators like it's a full-time job might be a worthwhile use of money, because it is, and it would also free up, people who aren't necessarily retired or independently wealthy or married to somebody who's working. It would free up people who rely on 9 to 5 jobs. But I don't know. I haven't really figured out a position on that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I really respect the folks like, I don't know, Brian Lenny sits next to me, or and hey guys, I remember being his age, and I remember having my kids be young, and I remember having, uh, so when I look at some of the stuff I do, if I'm knocking it out and really, burning the midnight oil or whatever on JFAC and health and welfare, that's it's perfect for me in this time in my life, right? Um, but I would hate to have certain people not be in the position that they're in because they could no longer do it either financially or time wise, right? Because I think it's really important to be represented by, true citizens of our state. And so far, it seems like there's a pretty good mix. And I just hope we don't get to the point where we alienate some folks that would be really good legislators just simply based on the fact that they just have to make a living. I mean, you see that in so many other aspects. I mean, talk about, the whole spirit of volunteerism. And everybody goes, we're losing volunteerism. I go, no, we're not losing volunteerism. Our whole dynamic social construct has changed. The day where you could be a volunteer firefighter working at the shoe store with a pager and be able to tell your boss, hey, I got a call. Those days are over. People work long distances away from where they live. They maybe are living somewhere that is, doing homework, whatever. It's changed. So you can't rely on the same constructs that we had 10, 20, 30 years ago, you know. And I hope we don't lose that in the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, the founder's ideal was that you'd have citizens serve their time and then go back to their real lives.
Yeah.
Um, but with government being as big and complex as it is, we need a powerful legislature really to
Yes.
rein in the bureaucracy and keep control of things because you're the ones who are accountable to the people. I don't know who's working in LSO or in the governor's office. I can't talk to them like we're talking here. I mean, we probably could, but I'd have to go track them down. But you're the ones who come before the voters every 2 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've given that some thought in the respect that we are the face of whatever happens there at the State House. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
Some of the other things happen behind the scenes. And if anybody's going to be upset, it's the legislator that you're going to be upset with. There's a whole lot of people that are down there for a whole lot longer than we are, but that's the way it's designed. We go down there to represent the people, and we should be the ones taking those stripes.
Comes with the job, I guess.
Yep.
So, want to ask about the professional firefighters of Idaho. They gave out their endorsements, and I noticed you weren't on that list, even though obviously that's your background. Do you have have you had conversations with them? Do you have a relationship, or do you find yourself at odds with some of their legislative priorities?
That's an interesting one. I'm going to be real delicate
Sure.
here in the sense that you don't hear a background dog, do you? Like a little whine. Is that coming through?
No.
Let me just let this. Sorry about that. My wife's down in Boise for one of the school board
Ah,
conferences. So got a couple little Boston Terriers that usually have to kind of wrangle in some way. But yeah, it's kind of funny. My son, who's a firefighter in Meridian, was the first one to kind of bring that to my attention. And if you look at their endorsement list, they endorse Woodward and Souder. They skip 2, 3, 4, 5. I think they endorse somebody in 6, and then they skip 7. But they pretty much disregarded most of the North Idaho folk. Being a 32-year public servant, and retiring as a deputy chief of a big, busy LA area fire department, and working with the union as a management person, I understand all the intricacies of how that is all kind of played. Um, I was really big on in this last session, both the first half and the second half, supporting EMS. And literally, I don't think you can see a vote that I made that had anything to do with supporting public safety, ISP, EMS, dispatchers. I've told people up here in North Idaho that my hypocrisy can only go so far. I will never try to keep somebody, me legislating. If I got it and I was a beneficiary of something, it's pretty tough for me not to support the industry that I came from, right? It's like, well, it was great for me, but hey, too bad for you guys, right? And I, and it's just me, it's my voice, right? It's just that I lean a little bit more towards supporting public safety. It's where I came from. So I was a little shocked, but then again, I'm not one of those type to seek these things. So it could very well be that I didn't call them up and say, hey, I'm looking for your endorsement. So I'm going to be real gentle about it.
Mhm.
I know when I approached the Kootenai County Fire Rescue when I was running the first time, and I told them, I've been here, I know the system, right? I'm here letting you get to know me, letting you know I'm running, but I'm not going to ask for your endorsement. If you can do anything, just step out of the endorsement business altogether when it comes to me in my challenger or the guy I was challenging. And they did, and I think that was a nice thing. So let me let this other dog out if you don't mind. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, this would be a great interview.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
so
part of life, part of
oh
how,
boy,
taking care of your home.
yeah. But so I don't know really what to even think about it. I'm also kind of a hard-nosed old deputy chief, and you can't expect much out of me if you're not going to endorse me, right? So um, I'd like to think that they gave it a little bit more thought than that.
Mhm.
And that's just, my personal feelings on it. So I'm about relationships, and you create relationships through trust and mutual understanding, and we'll see. But then again, there was a wide swath of folks that they completely just left off their whole endorsement list. So um, maybe it's just a good thing that I'm in better company with a group of people in two through five. And if when it comes right down to it, I'd rather be nestled up against the folks that I'm serving with up here in solidarity than be someone standing out on a list of 5 districts up here.
That's an interesting thing about endorsements. Somebody once told me that when you endorse someone, they inherit half your friends, but all your enemies. Something along those lines. So, sometimes endorsements turn out to be anti-endorsements, depending on who's doing the observing.
No, and you got it exactly right. So I try not to read into the stuff too much.
Yeah.
And I'm also not the guy that's like, well, I don't remember to like you guys anymore. It's just not me. But I do, because I'm from that industry, kind of like, I pause a little
Yeah.
bit, give it a little question. My son's probably more upset about it than I am.
Well, that's one reason why I decided not to do endorsements, because that would, I feel like I would only make a bunch of enemies. People know where I stand on things. Uh,
Right.
but I'd rather do what I'm doing now and just have conversations with people, learn, where you're coming from, what perspective are you bringing to the table?
Yeah, I think there's been some good advice I've had from some people I won't mention their names. They may not want to be mentioned, but that have told me that they won't endorse, that they did early on in their career in legislation, and it came back and bit them, and it's just not worth it. Again, the friends, the enemies, whatever. I mean, if somebody needs your endorsement that bad and it's going to make the difference of them getting elected or not, I mean, then I think your tolerances are way too close.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it is a fine line, I think, because a lot of the big statewide groups and PACs, they're being strategic about who they endorse, where they endorse, when they endorse, and the point is to, kind of holistically build a legislature that will support, whatever it is they want to support. But at the same time, you're supposed to be out there talking to your constituents, the voters of District 5, and figuring out, okay, what's important to you? How can I best represent you? And it's like a tension there.
Yes, I can sense it. So I'll just, I just was endorsed by the Ag Pack, and so I always appreciate the endorsements I get. I got a couple of them here, but I don't actively really go out and try to get them. Um,
I'll need to catch up and put them up on the website.
Yes, I'm going to have to do that.
Yeah. As you go and talk to people in your district, what are some of the really important issues that you're hearing from them as far as what they want to see the legislature handle?
It's kind of weird. You just never know. Obviously, you get the questions about school funding, taxes, the typical stuff. But suddenly, this what do you call it? The chemtrails. Have you heard much about that?
I see
It's
a lot of people talking about it. I've honestly tried to stay out of that discussion.
Oh yeah, and I won't go any further than that, but that's a big thing all of a sudden that
Mhm.
that people are like, what's going on? I guess Tennessee has legislation that they've banned any kind of, cloud seeding or any kind of whatever, over the whole state of Tennessee. So that's gotten a lot of talk. I've heard people talk about that Florida has a law similar to I don't know, something to do with if you're in your car and you come up on a protest and people start attacking you in your car, you have the ability, almost like a stand your ground thing, to be able to get out of there, and not be held accountable for potentially, injuring one of the protesters. And I guess to me, it's kind of a, you know, not of a litmus test, but just representation of kind of where people are suddenly in the world we live in today, that um, they're fearful about government, and they're not trusting government,
Mhm.
and they see things, and it's there's a site that every once in a while I get on Telegram, and it's kind of while I'm in session, almost like having somebody telling me how people are weighing in on a particular piece of legislation, where I can kind of feel like I got the finger on the pulse of what's going on in North Idaho. And yeah, so it's those types of issues that are kind of rising to the surface. I mean, like I said, all the other ones that we typically talk about are still there. I was real big on medical freedom, so I was real happy to have, gotten bills across the table. I think I had 10 pieces of legislation that I either sponsored or co-sponsored over the 2-year period that were signed. A lot of those working with great other legislators, Julianne Young and Ron Mendive and Jordan Redmond, and just numerous people. But we've got some things I was really proud of. Counselor's conscience bill, the residential care visitation, essential caregiver. I was, and it's funny because I always get because I'm on JFAC, and they see that I'm not voting for no on every budget, that I can't quite be conservative, but they don't realize that, I push through the work requirements for the SNAP program, and you know, no money, no state or federal money for the needle exchange programs. And you don't get any more conservative efforts, especially in a fiscal sense, of something like those, So it's always interesting, some people appreciate or don't appreciate or even know about,
Mhm.
but pleased with some of the things we're able to do, parental rights things. Representative Mendive and me got the parents' ability to teach that driver's ed portion, that 6-hour portion. So if you're in some rural area and the schools aren't offering it, and you can't afford to pay the $400 or whatever it is for a private company, and maybe there's not one even near you, the parents are now authorized to be able to do that training. So pretty happy with what I was able to accomplish, and like I said, I'm looking forward to doing something similar when I get back down there, if I get back down there after this election.
Yeah. The number, all the numbers out there, the numerous people have scorecards, Idaho Freedom Foundation, obviously, Freedom Index, Spending Index, IACI has their scorecard, and there's a few others. I think they're good data points. They give you a general idea, but you really have to dig down. Okay, what bills, is this legislator actually voting for or against? And also, and this is something I had the opportunity to see being in the Capitol a lot during this session. What's going on behind the scenes? What's going on in the committees? I mean, obviously, I don't see all behind the scenes. I'm,
Right.
just a member of the public, but I can see what's happening in committees and where bills are going, and um, even that's just not captured by a single number.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's it's necessary, but it's difficult, because you've got like 3 or 4 or 5, and some you score high, some you don't, um, and we can't expect in kind of this day and age, with both, husband wife working, and just to kind of how our society's gotten to be able to get people to be more informed voters. So they look to those things, and I just tell people it's like, yeah, use that as a data point or a benchmark, but if it's a town hall and you have a question, here, look at the votes I made. And you do your own homework and say, well, I don't like how he voted on this. Or you look at, oh, I do like how he voted on this, and know for the most part that generally speaking, if it was a critical vote, I was already weighing what my constituents wanted me to do anyway, based on the studies I'm doing by people reaching out. So just use it as a kind of a first blush data point to maybe have you delve a little bit more into what that legislator is all about. That's how I tell people to use it.
Yeah, that's and I think that's reasonable.
So,
If you see someone with a, whatever scorecard it is, if you see someone with an 80 and someone else with a 20, then okay, you know that there's a very big difference between the two. But if one is 75 and the other is 78, then well, you're really gonna have to find more
right,
information.
right, right.
So coming back to your campaign, you know, you won pretty handily last time, and now you're defending your record. Do you find that campaigning as an incumbent is different or feels different, or you have to have different strategies than as a challenger?
Again, just because of my makeup, I feel that there's more expected of me, and I expect more out of myself. I should know more, obviously, about the issues. I know the difference of how I campaigned the first time,
Mhm.
and it was a lot of emotional type ties to things, especially coming out of the pandemic or being in the midst of it or whatever. This time, I've got to have some facts and figures, and and I am running on a record now, which is to a certain extent. I had a little debate town hall the other night. I don't have to sit there and give my whole life story again. Now it starts with, I'm your incumbent senator from District 5, and this is kind of where District 5 is. And, generally people, already kind of know me and kind of care about from that point on now, right? So before it was, the earth cooled, and, I came out of this, and hey, and here's the reason I'm here, and this is what yeah. So it's easier in that respect, more difficult in the fact that I think there's a higher level of expectation that I expect that out of myself as well.
What what is unique about District 5? I try to ask this of everybody because obviously you chose to live there, and it's your home and the place that you represent. There are some districts that take up multiple counties. District 8, just north of me, is just massive, and then there are some, District 20, just south of me, is really just a few city blocks, just because it's so dense. Um, what's unique about District 5 compared to the rest of the districts in Idaho?
Yeah. Well, personally, I wouldn't be here if my sister and brother-in-law didn't move here. So, and we didn't come up to visit them, and I wasn't thinking about retiring and all that stuff. And but it is unique in the sense that it captured me. I like it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm OCD, but I like things so, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a big postage stamp. It's all within one county, and it encompasses kind of a similar kind of demographic to where I came from. And in that you've got all the way from Worley, you've got the reservation, you've got, Cougar Gulch, you've got the lake and the people that live on the lake. You've got Post Falls. It's just, there's like a really neat mix of people up here, and a real neat, it's beautiful. I mean, the lake and, the mountains, and it's just a gorgeous place. The river, going over that bridge on the 95. It never gets old when you look up, the river down towards Spokane. I don't care what time of day it is. Beautiful at a sunset. But I just love this area. And it's not like a single kind of, I don't know. There's just multifaceted. Like I say, you got some homes that are like 10 million. You know what I mean? It's just a wide range of demographics up here, and just the friendliest, nicest people. You know, so I feel very fortunate. Maybe that's part of why I chose to run. It's like these some really neat people up here.
Mhm.
Um, you know, why
Yeah.
would I not want to represent them? You know,
Well, it's interesting hearing that perspective because there's some people who are running who they're fifth generation Idahoans, and they'll make sure to tell you that, and
right?
they want to run to preserve the heritage that their family has. But then there are others. You come from California. I come from Washington State. We came here because of what Idaho was and is, and we want to preserve it from what happened. I came here in 2018 because I saw the which direction politics were going, and it's not a place I wanted to raise my children. Even though I miss, Washington, I miss the trees and the mountains. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to move to North Idaho sometime just to get those things back. But
Yeah, you might want to come up, take a visit. You'll be up here for the convention, so
yes, I am very much looking forward to it.
yeah,
It's always a pleasure to come up that way.
we'll have to have coffee or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any other additional closing thoughts? And also, what can people do to find out more and support you?
As I've got my dog scratching at the door, but yeah, I think my closing thoughts would really try to make sure that people know that it's super important to me to actually legislate and govern, um, and to actually represent the constituents. That's really all I'm here for. There at this point in my life, there's really nothing self-serving that I can get out of this. Um, I think we're in a critical time as a nation, and I'm really worried about all this time leading up to the November election. Not so much me, but just on the national level.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sensing that there's angst and there's slight division in the Republican Party that bothers me. If I could like say something to all the folks out there, it would be uh, let's remember who we're fighting against. Let remember what our goal is, and don't eat ourselves. And it's a shame because I'm seeing it kind of ramp up a little bit. I mean, there's already an enemy out there that's trying to diminish us. We can't do it to each other as well. And that's definitely a message I want to get. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to campaign. Um, and and if I'm the person that gets sent back down to Boise, people will know that I'm going to give it 100%. And I'm looking forward to doing it. Like I said, I'll do it as long as people think they find it appropriate to send me down there again.
Senator Carl Bjerke, District 5. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you taking the time to talk. I thought that was a good conversation. And if your opponent agrees to talk, we'll put them both up at the same time. Otherwise, at some point, I'll just say, okay, well, I've got to publish this one.
Perfect.
So
Anything else you need from me?
no, that's it. I appreciate you, and I'll have to go track you down when I come up for the
Yes,
convention.
definitely come up. I'll take you there. There's a lot of nice restaurants and everything up here. Definitely look me up when you get up here.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. Thank
Thank you.
you.